The spirit of a warrior, the spirit of a soldier never changes. The weapons change, the war change, the politics change, but the spirit, the heart of that soldier is the same. And he's a human being, and he's liable to do just exactly what he did in 1775 is what he'll do in 2025.
Welcome to the UMGC podcast, Unstoppable Stories, with your host, Lauren Cardillo.
Today, I'm joined by Dale Dye, a man who wears many hats, like retired Marine Corps, author, actor, military advisor to films. Dale, thank you so much for being here today. We love having you.
Sure, it's my pleasure. I hope we can engage in some interesting conversation. We'll see how that goes.
Exactly. So I just gave like the Wikipedia, a little bio of you. For people who have seen you in films, how would you describe Dale Dye? Like your career, what you do?
I think the word that fits most or best is weird. As people who kind of follow the issue know, I was 20 years in the United States Marine Corps, from officer to enlisted man, from enlisted man to officer, several combat tours. And throughout that, I'd always been a kind of a storyteller. I'd always been the kind of a guy, the guy around the campfire that can keep you fascinated for 45 minutes telling a shaggy dog story that has absolutely no point at all. I'm that guy. And that led to a lot of things. I mean, I have a creative itch, and I've always had it since I was a kid. And it requires regular scratching. And to do that, I get a kick out of people. I'm a social kind of guy, and I love to tell stories, and I love to tell good stories. Stories that people can relate to, and so I tried to do that throughout my life, and then I tried to pursue a bit of an education that would help me as a storyteller, that would make me more facile, more glib, more interesting as a storyteller. While I was stationed out on Okinawa, while I was in the Marine Corps, several friends of mine were pursuing night school, going to school. And I said, well, how's that work? They said, look, there's this University of Maryland place. And all I knew about Maryland was, it's somewhere near Washington, D.C.
And somehow they're near Okinawa, right?
Yeah, I'm in Okinawa. So what the hell do I know about this? And but I looked into it. I talked to a couple of people, and they said, "Look, we can do this. What do you want to major in?" And I said, "Well, hell, I want to be a storyteller and a performer and all." They said, "Well, slow down. We don't necessarily have that right here, but we can help you be a storyteller." I enrolled, and began to go to classes. And what surprised me was how interesting stuff that I considered to be nonsense really was.
Like what?
Well, I began to study. I'd studied history, but I hadn't really read it. I'd read the nuts and bolts. This happened on this date, and these people were involved. But now I began to read memoirs. I began to read sophisticated works of analysis and all that sort of thing. And that really opened my eyes. I said, geez, maybe I could do something like that. I mean, Jesus, I ended up, in chemistry and higher math and stuff that just made me gag. But I had to do it. I had to take it. And the interesting thing was I had these great teachers who said, look, stop being an idiot. Sit down. I'm going to explain this all to you. And I got that kind of treatment. And so I sat down.
You're like, you're in the Marines while you're doing this.
Yeah. Kicking me in the butt was de rigueur. I understood all about that. And these good Maryland instructors did. I'm not sure that it was just the way they taught or because they thought they saw something valuable in me. But they struggled with me and got me through these science and math courses. And then I could return my attention to English where I wanted to be. And I pursued it and continue to pursue it. And lo and behold, in 1981, I had fulfilled all the requirements, and off we went. Now, I should mention that Dr. George Sidney, who kind of mentored me through my English pursuits, was a writer and a published writer. And he had read some of the things I was trying to put together some sort of a memoir about my combat experiences in Vietnam, particularly in the Battle of Hue City in Tep in 1968. And he'd read some of that. And he said, this is a book. And I said, yeah, but you got to find a publisher and got to find an editor, and then you have to convince somebody to read it. And he said, I can help with that. And he did. He sent it to some agent friends of his, some publisher friends of his, and lo and behold, it ended up being my first published novel, and met great critical acclaim at the time.
I just read it this week.
Have you?
Run Through the Raindrops, right?
Yeah, Run Through the Raindrops, right.
And reading through it, I could see your scenes. Like, it was very visual, had great characters, was obviously war, but I could see it going in my head. So.
Yeah. And Sidney said at the time, I reminded him of Hunter Thompson because of the way I described things and how I was involved in the action. But it was a really tough book. And I think a lot of critics said, well, this is a guy who's been there. Let's listen to him. And lo and behold, they did. And since then, I guess I've published about 12 more novels. And it's another one of those itches that I've always got to scratch. And that's what I do when I'm not doing movies or television.
Right. The list is impressive. I read through all the names of the books. I was like, wow, besides everything else, you're writing books. So what made you decide that book was very authentic, that I should now take that sense of authenticity to movies?
Well, I'll tell you what the real story is. I had always been a movie fan all my life, particularly military movies, because they were movies about my life. But the common denominator was they just pissed me off. They weren't reflective or representative of what I knew to be the truth about people in combat, about wars in general, about military life, about how we relate to each other, about where our horrible black humor comes from. And I began to think about that. I said, well, why the hell not? What's happening here? And through a little research, I discovered that very, very few people at this point who were writing and producing and directing movies had ever had a lick of military experience. They didn't know what the hell they were talking about. So what they did is they mimicked or parroted the last bad war movie they saw. And it was a kind of a vicious circle, a circular firing squad. And I said, well, somebody's got to be able to break this. And I'm not sure where I got the gumption to do it. But I said, well, look, that can be me. I'll go out to Hollywood and I'll get on movie sets. And the first guy I see wearing a tie and carrying a briefcase, I'll probably be a producer. So I'll snatch him up and say, hey, you're screwed up and I'm going to unscrew you. And here's how we do. That didn't work real well. I ended up getting arrested and escorted off the lots. But there was...
With the best of them.
Yeah, absolutely right. But I decided I just needed a break. And I'd been out in LA. I was retired from active duty at this point, proudly wearing my university graduation ring. So I became a bit of a ring knocker as well as a wannabe. And I said, well, I'm not having much luck at this. And I was thinking over what my options were. And frankly, as an English literature major, there weren't a lot. I could be a cop, but I'd been shot too many times to want to be a cop on America's main streets. So, or I could be a cubicle rat, some defense contractor, but I'd be a suicide in 6 months, and I knew that. Or I could become a barfly at the local VFW, but that didn't seem like a productive way to go.
And you were
So,
too young for that.
yeah.
Right. Right.
So I said, look, let me just give it a couple of weeks more. I was about to give up, frankly. I'd run out of money, and I was couch surfing around LA with old buddies. And no, I couldn't get anybody to really buy into my theory. They said, look, we've been making war movies for years, and we've made zillions of dollars without some clown like you coming in and telling us we got it wrong. So go away. And I was about to, but I had learned to read the trade papers, Daily Variety and the Hollywood Reporter, and I came across this little announcement, really. I think it was in Daily Variety, that said, a heretofore relatively unknown writer-director by the name of Oliver Stone is going to do a movie based on his own experiences as a combat infantryman in Vietnam. And I said, oh, hell, there it is. If I can just find this guy, if I can just get him to listen to why I think most war movies are bad and how we can make a good one, he'll buy it because he's been there. Well, through some machinations that I really shouldn't tell you about because the statute of limitations may not have run out yet, I managed to get in with Stone for about 5 minutes, and I had to make my pitch. He was cutting another movie that he'd made at that time. We were somewhere down in a studio on Hollywood Boulevard, and I pitched him. I said, look, you and I know that the only way an actor is going to have any inkling of what we went through or who we were when we were 19 in the jungle, he's got to be there. We've got to give him those touchstones. We've got to give him that experience, at least to the extent that he has an insight, that he can understand it. And so I left, and I said, well, I've blown it. This guy didn't give me much reaction at all. And then a couple of days later, in fact, I was packing up. But a couple of days later, he called, had his producer call me and said, look, Oliver wants another meeting. I think he likes what you had to tell him. We had another meeting. And the upshot of all of this was that he gave me 33 actors, mostly unknowns at the time: Willem Dafoe, Charlie Sheen, Forrest Whitaker, Tom Berenger, Johnny Depp. And he said, take him to the jungle. You got 3 weeks. And if you do what you need to do whatever you do. But when you bring them down out of the jungle, they better be who you and I were when we were 19 in Vietnam. And I mean, that's mission type orders. That now I'm the teacher. Now I'm the professor. And I loved it. And I took those people up and beat the hell out of them, just as we'd been beaten in combat. They worked night and day. They only ate twice a day, unless they pissed me off, and then they only ate once a day. And I just wore them out. I reduced them to the lowest common denominator, and then built from that the attitudes and the insights that we got when we were young men in combat. And so we brought that little $5 million is all we had, and that was chump change. We brought that little movie home, started showing it around, and lo and behold, it won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. That was Platoon, by the way, and Best Director for Oliver. And he was gracious enough at the Academy Awards to have me stand and recognize me as the guy who contributed greatly to the success of the film. That was an epiphany to me. As we began to do press appearances and that sort of thing about the film, um, I would find more and more Vietnam veterans in the audience, and they would tell me, "Look, I've been in the closet for years. I wouldn't talk about Vietnam. Wouldn't tell my kids, my wife." And then came Platoon, and that was an opportunity for me to say, "Look, this experience is why I don't want to talk about it." And what I noted, what the real epiphany was, a film like that is able to really influence societal change. Um, Now that I didn't realize that. I thought of films primarily as entertainment on one hand and perhaps a little bit of education, but I didn't realize the vast impact they can have until we did Platoon, and I started to see these vets coming up to me and saying, "Look, man, thanks for doing that," because it was the only chance I had to really talk about my experience. And I had
How did
learned.
that make you? How did that make you feel when they came up to you?
Uh,
Because I mean, the code is not to talk about it. So how did it make you feel?
I was humbled, frankly, and I'm very serious about that. That's not false ego. I said, "Oh my God, I've got a tiger by the tail here, and best I not screw it up." Um, and so I began to say, "Look, if films that I work on can have that kind of impact, I better do them right, and I better get serious about this, and I better work with some serious directors." And it's been uphill since then. Um, I mean, I've done Saving Private Ryan, Forrest Gump, Band of Brothers, um, The Pacific, and Masters of the Air, and on and on and on. And each of those is more than just a check mark on the resume. Um, I think each of those is an opportunity, and this is really what drives me. I think I'm committed to show some much deserved and long overdue light on the service and sacrifice of our military people, regardless of the era. Um, and I've always sort of kept that in my mind. Do that. If you don't do anything else, don't do that, and don't screw it up. So that's kind of been my lodestone that I've touched as we've gone through.
How have the actors reacted to the idea that I'm going to go to a boot camp and do something I've never done before?
Well,
And I
look,
may not like it.
it's become a sort of apocryphal among the community of actors now. You've been to Captain Dyer's boot camp? Oh, I was there, and the word gets around that community, and a lot of it's nonsense, but they love to tell these stories anyway. Uh, Look, I think for the most part, young male and female actors, incidentally, um, grow up in a sort of a bubble. They grow up in a lifestyle that is centered and focused on them. That's understandable. It's not right, it's not proper, but it's understandable. And so they love a challenge. Can I do this? Can I do something that's out of the ordinary? And I show them that they can.
Once again, you're listening to Dale Dye on Unstoppable Stories. If you want to hear more stories like Dale's, don't forget to like or subscribe. Following that idea, what are the details you like that the audience gets that maybe they didn't get before from Saving Private Ryan or Platoon? Things that you presented.
I don't know, because I've been driven by this business of trying to show people that military people, first responders, people who are involved in what I'd say is a calling rather than a job. Those are great, selfless people, and need to be appreciated. And so I push to recognize that. And it's very hard because we're all kind of wrapped around our personal axle. Am I going to make the mortgage this month, or where's my next meal going to come from? I mean, and it varies by degree. human nature forces us all to think about me first. And I like to think, I know that there are people among us who think of me second, and who think of you first. And so I try to convey that message if I can. I try to find subtle ways to get that into the film and TV projects that I do. Something that demonstrates that these are people who are devoted to you, to our society, to worldwide good and worldwide safety. And that's sometimes very hard to do without being overt about it. You got to kind of sneak it in there sometimes. But that's one of the things I'm very interested in communicating.
I mean, and say, both Platoon, but especially Saving Private Ryan did that. It's like we're in pursuit of one person.
I hope so. Yeah. Ryan, and listen, I'm taking no credit for this. That's Steven Spielberg's brilliance and writer Robert Rodat, who wrote it. But I helped in training Tom Hanks and the other actors and getting them to understand what was behind the words that were written for these World War II Rangers. And so I think my contribution in things like Saving Private Ryan, although staging that opening sequence D-Day was pretty spectacular, but I think my contribution is giving those actors the ability to interpret what Rodat had written and what Spielberg was demanding. I gave them an insight, a way to interpret that properly as selfless human being, and they did it, I think.
Take me back to that opening scene for a moment, because obviously you were not at D-Day, but it's insane and crazy. What were you feeling like watching it happen? Helping it.
Well, I tell you, I got my General Eisenhower fix that day, watching D-Day on the spool. And I had staged it all. I'd set it all up. And I think we had 1,000 men, 14 armored vehicles, and 7 ships at sea. And I was controlling them all on one radio. So I was busy that day. But looking down from the cliff where I was actually overseeing it, and seeing it on spool, seeing it happen, was fabulous. It was my own insight into how this must have been. And I can remember we had trained everybody that was there, and we used a lot of the Irish Garda or Irish Reserve Forces. And I had taught them all how to load and fire these weapons. And we gave them enough ammunition so that they could reload. Because the last thing I knew, once we blew the whistle on this puppy, you can say cut all day long. They're not going to cut until they're out of ammo. And I told Spielberg that. I said, look, boss, make sure we got enough film because they're not going to stop. And they didn't. And I got a sense of the power of it all. The majesty, if you will, and that's a difficult word, but the majesty that must have been demonstrated on June 6, 1944, when those people came ashore. And I think that was another epiphany for me. I said, okay, this is why you're doing this. Now do it again and don't screw it up.
Was there more than one take?
No, not on that. There wasn't. No, listen, that was a master, and that's all you're going to get, pal. And so Spielberg knew that, and he set it up so that he could then drive in for coverage on the things that he observed in the master shot, and he did brilliantly, I might add.
And so, how did you get roped into also acting, though? I mean, was that like on your bingo card? Like, I want to be a writer, I want to be authentic, and now I'm going to act.
I don't know. I'm not sure I ever really had that in mind. But I discovered once I began to do it that's another itch that I can scratch, a creative itch. The truth is, I kind of got shanghaied into it. Oliver Stone had seen me running this unit that I'd built for him for Platoon. And he saw me issuing orders and doing this and chewing butt and doing this sort of thing. And I think he watched that for a while and he said, why would I hire some New York actor to be the company commander when this guy already is, and he shows it. And so he pitched it to me. And he said, look, I want you to be Captain Harris. I want you to be the company commander. And I said, well, I am no. I want you to be on camera as the company commander. And I said, well, wait a minute, man. You know, I'm about as ugly as a hedge fence, and I don't know how to do this. And what are you talking about? And he said, look, we're going to dye your hair. I've always been white-headed. He said, we're going to dye your hair a little bit, and then you're going to do exactly what you would do as a company commander in this particular situation. Never mind the cameras, just ignore them and do what you do. Pay attention to the guys. And so I was encouraged by Tom Berenger and Willem Dafoe and Mark Wolf and a few others. And they said, look, you can do this, man. Just treat us like you treated us, you know. And so I did that. And I was lucky that the critics, in reviewing the film, sort of picked that up and said, we don't know who this guy is, but he's pretty good. And so that kind of launched an acting career. And I kind of approached it the same way that I approach being an advisor. Here's an opportunity, if I do it right, to demonstrate devotion to duty, selflessness, professionalism, that sort of thing. And look, that's worked pretty well. I mean, I'm the most typecast guy in Hollywood, and it used to be me and Lee Ermey were the two most typecast guys in Hollywood before Lee, God bless him, has passed on. So it's now it's me.
Love it. So go back for a second. Last year, was it Masters of the Air?
Yeah, that was the most recent miniseries.
Right. So that's like a whole new crop of actors. We're talking aviation as well.
Yeah.
Did you have to adapt anything? You know, was your method still there? You know, to work with them? How
Sure.
did that work?
Look, it was a little more mental and academic than it was when I'm teaching an infantry outfit. But you can probably see behind me, we have a library of about 11,000 books, and I regularly am in the middle of them. I mean, so I do research on all aspects. I mean, I like to say that my outfit, which is called Warriors Global, will do anything, whether it's from Star Wars to the Peloponnesian Wars, you name it, I'll do it. But that requires research, and Masters of the Air certainly did. You know, I've never been an aviator. I had an uncle who was a B-17 crewman in Europe, and my executive officer, Mike Stokey, who's been with me for 50 years, by the way, had a dad who was a B-29 pilot in the war. So we kind of got our heads together and figured out how we were going to teach this stuff. And they had built, I mean, this was a pricey project. They had built 2 full-scale B-17s, and we were shooting over in England. So we were able to train on those aircraft. They didn't fly, but they didn't need to. You were inside that aluminum sausage, and off you went. So we've done all sorts of things, and our basic assumption is that the spirit of a warrior, the spirit of a soldier, never changes. You know, the weapons change, the war change, the politics change, but the spirit, the heart of that soldier is the same. And he's a human being, and he's liable to do just exactly what he did in 1775 is what he'll do in 2025. So we kind of use that as a bearing mark. And it's been great. Although we did Masters of the Air in England, and I was over there a year, and it was in the middle of the COVID nonsense. So everything was, you know, it was like pulling teeth just to get on the set. So that was a difficulty. but we
I'm
we
sure.
persevere.
Yes. So, say you meet a young filmmaker today who wants to make a film about a military action, a war, and they don't have a huge budget. What would be your advice to them? Things that you've learned over time about how to make it authentic, besides hiring you.
Look, the neat thing about technology nowadays is you don't need all of the expensive trappings of movie making. My advice would be break out your cell phone, shoot that puppy, and then start showing it to people. Post it online. And along with doing that, say, and by the way, I've got this great story and script that I'd like to get going. But what you have to understand about Hollywood or movie making, filmmaking in general, wherever it is around the world, it's a closed club. It's a little small fraternity, usually fraternity, although there's sorority elements to it, because there's so much money involved. And we're talking about astronomical amounts of money. And nobody wants to share that. They want it all. So they want to let you in. And so you're gonna go through a period where your tenacity, your dedication to telling that story on film is going to be sorely tested. And you got to stick with it. If you're not prepared to do that, do something else.
Are there some projects that you have sort of kept close to you that you'd still like to do?
Yeah, there are. There's a couple. I've got a World War II story from Europe about the battle for Lafayette in Normandy that I want to do, and it's written, and I've had it sold 2 or 3 times, and it's fallen through. I want to do that. I also want to do a story about Korea. I've written a book called The Korean Odyssey, and that book needs to be interpreted on film, and I want to do that. But I'm getting a little agey now, and I've still got one more to do in Australia. I leave next month. So many people want me to do so many other things, their stuff, that it's sometimes hard to do my own. And I haven't had a lot of success with it, but we'll see.
Do you have a favorite film that you worked on? And maybe it's not because it won an Oscar or something else that just affected you, personally in a way that you're like, this experience was the best. Do you have one of those, or they're all great?
Well, there's a bunch of them. But if we disregard the Oscar winners and the Emmy winners, I particularly enjoyed working on a film called The Rough Riders, which was made for TNT. John Milius directing, with Tom Berenger playing Teddy Roosevelt and me playing Leonard Wood, his boss, and all of every Western character in the world, Sam Elliott and a few others that showed up in that film, and that was a lot of fun. We shot from West Texas all the way across the state to San Antonio on location, and it was like a traveling circus, and I started to understand how people could run away from home and join the circus. So I enjoyed that one. That was a lot of fun. But they've all been fun in their own ways, and it's difficult to single out anything particular.
Are there mistakes that you made along the way, just because you were new at it?
Are there mistakes?
That you now go, oh,
Yeah, there's a bunch of those. I let my ego get in the way a couple of times. Lost jobs because I shot my fat mouth off, and so yeah, there've been mistakes I've made, but I think what's if there's a quality that comes of that, I do understand that when you make mistakes, the key is not to repeat them and to learn from them, and I'm pretty good at that.
because I'm sure there are parts of you look back at Platoon or Saving Private Ryan, and you're like, wish I could have done that a little bit different, but it worked for the time.
Look, there's thousands of those instances. And the interesting part is, not only do I see them, there's usually some small detail that I've screwed up or ignored or something. Not only do I see them, but everybody who has a computer sees them. And immediately, you know, I'm accessible by email and stuff, so I'll get hundreds of. Did you know that the color of the stitching on the uniform was? Well, either I didn't know or I forgot about it or something, and so yeah, there are some people out there that, you know, the kind of guys who wear out the remote controls pause button, completely wear it out, and they go through my films, and they just tear me up.
Here's a last question for you. If that person who got out of the Marines in 1984 saw where you have come now, what is that, almost how many years? Can I do math? 40 years later. Yeah. What would they say? I mean, what would their reaction be to what you have become?
I think they'd probably say, who the hell are you? And how did you, look, I spent a lot of time, this is an example of it. I spent a lot of time talking about that sort of thing. I've got at least 2 appearances I've got to make in the next 2 weeks, where I'm going to be talking to audiences about this sort of thing. And I do that because I believe that if you prepare yourself well, if you're a military person, don't get stuck in the military mud. Yeah, you have to know a lot about it. Yeah, you have to study it. Yeah, you have to learn how to perform and physically train yourself and mentally train yourself. But there's a whole world out there. And it behooves you to become familiar with a bit of it. The neat thing about college education is that you can focus your interest. It's not like general overall education like you get in secondary school or primary school. You can focus on what you particularly are interested in and what you particularly want to do. And so I'd urge young people who want to do something like what I want to do, to have 2 things: to have a broad-based interest in everything that goes on around you, because you never can tell where there is story out there, and to be tenacious, have a goal in mind, know what that goal is, focus hard, strip away the crapola and find out what the jewel is. Where is it I really want to go? What is it I really want to do? And then go for that. And an institution like Maryland gives you the opportunity to do that. And it gives you the opportunity to do that while you're trying to make a living or, you know, trying to serve your country. So take advantage of it.
So have you ended up where you wanted to goal-wise, or even more than you imagined?
Look, I don't think there's the ultimate final touchdown. What happens, interestingly, is that you think, okay, now if I just do this, I'm going to have made won the gold medal. No, what happens is you get there and you say, boy, that was cool. But how about this? And the next thing you know, you've got some other goal develops, and and that's, the cycle of life. And in my view, it's the cycle of creativity. And I like that.
Well, Dale, thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure.
I love listening to your stories about the military because I got some of that from my dad, and then also movies, And for everybody listening, watching, please remember to like and subscribe if you want to hear more unstoppable stories just like this. You can even catch up on previous podcasts on your preferred podcast channel. So, Dale, thanks so much. Good luck on the next shoot.
Thank you, Lauren. It's my pleasure. It was nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you.